Whether you are in the country and listening through SpiceFM 94.4 Nairobi or 87.9 Mombasa, or you're in Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret, Nyeri, Malindi, or you're watching us from wherever you are in the world on our live stream, SpiceFM KE, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or you are joining us on KTN Home, a very good morning to you. Let's begin with today's African proverb. City Muga.
Let us begin with today's proverb. Even the king of the forest, the lion, protects itself from flies.
Even the king of the forest, the lion, protects itself from flies. Everybody has an irritant.
Everyone has an irritant. And there was a time in this country where the line of work that our two guests are in, the general line of work our two guests are in, were considered to be extreme irritants. People always pointing out to things you don't particularly want to be pointed out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have they left that box? Members of the evil society.
Members of the evil society have become just part and parcel of everyday life. Yes. And that is the danger. Because when they become part and parcel of everyday life, then their voice just joins the din. The impact is at best minuscule. Yes.
It's not as loud as it ought to be.
They end up losing their groove.
Right. Yes. So our guests in the studio this morning, one is from ICJ Kenya. She's a program officer for economic justice. Jen Mohia, welcome to Kenya's Biggest Conversation.
Thank you.
And then we have Derek Mahandia. He's a regional officer for Transparency International Kenya. Welcome.
Thank you.
We are discussing enhancing transparency and accountability in governance through access to information. Access to information is such a big thing that we even included it in our constitution and said, you know what, we have it. We even have laws that say every citizen should have access to public information. And even in ways in which we started to break away that mold of Siri Kali by government and saying, yeah, there's some Siri that, we allow you to keep for a while, but not all Siri is Kali. Let us have information and access to this information. This is what you deal with on a daily basis, isn't it, Jane?
Yes, it is.
And when you say access to information, what kind of information do you necessarily talk about? Well, from the economic justice front.
Personally, for me, it's mostly about public sector accountability. And really the issues that most of us are concerned about are issues of public finances. We all pay taxes. We want to know how our money is being applied, how government is prioritizing issues. So at the very foundation of access to information is information held by public agencies that concerns you as a citizen and affects the way you exercise other rights.
Whose public agency? We were having a conversation in the previous hour about contracts signed and entered into by a privately owned entity and listed, Kenya Power, and independent, privately owned power producers. Now, those contracts, would you consider that public information?
Actually, within the Access to Information laws, the Access to Information Act, if a private entity is in any way applying public resources, then that contract would be subject to disclosure. So if KPLC is in any way exercising public resources and that information affects the general public, then that information should be subject to what we call proactive disclosure even. They shouldn't wait to be prompted. They should just be disclosing that information.
They should willfully disclose information.
Yeah.
Hear that, City.
And so what if they don't?
Water off a duck's back.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
What if they don't? As we have often seen is the practice. There have been calls over and over again from, private sector, civil society, say, look, let us know what is going on here, because that then could explain some of the high costs that we see and the mismanagement issues later. So they don't. Then what?
We have options. The formal process for requesting for that access would be writing to the CEO, who is considered as the Access to Information Officer under the Act. Then you give them 21 days to respond. If they do not respond within that 21 days, within the 21 days, they should be able to tell you what is the decision on your request. they can either tell you, look, we need more time to consult on this information, and they're only allowed to do that once for another 14 days. But if they're not forthcoming at all, then you go to the Commission on Administrative Justice, which is the commission that is obligated to oversight the Access to Information Act. And then from there, the commission will look at your complaint, and then they will investigate. They have investigatory powers, and then they can issue orders. And those orders are also binding on this public entity. If that does not work out, court is always an option also to sort of force the public entities to do what they're supposed to do in law. Yeah.
Derek,
Yes.
as Transparency International Kenya, have you tried to access some bit of information and you actually were able to do it without having to go through the whole process of getting them forced to do it through the court, or even going to 1, 2, 3 offices? Have you, as an institution, applied for certain information, access to certain information, and actually got it?
We have done, and there are some bits of information we've been able to obtain. But before I get into that, let me get back to Chris. He called us Evil Society, and he gave us a not so warm welcome. I think the way things are happening, there's a change in how a lot of institutions are engaging the government these days, especially when we got the new constitution. You know, before we did not have enough platforms to engage governments in a different way. We did not have the legal instruments, the institutional frameworks. So the way we engage the government these days in terms of calling out the government, seeking information, can be a bit different. We explore options like the court, institutions which are supposed to guarantee some of these information and corrective measures, disciplinary measures. We engage them. So we active, Daktari. Yeah, but in terms of the progress that we've made in accessing government information, there has been a lot of progress, especially at county level. There are a lot of counties which are proactively disclosing information, and whenever we seek those informations, those bits of information, we are able to receive them. But we are not there yet. I think we still have a lot of resistance and resilience from governments in terms of disclosing information, whether proactively or by request. So there is still a lot of challenges in that. I think we still have the old block, the old way of thinking among especially senior government officers. And it seems the idea that they can disclose significant information, especially information such a strange thing for them to accept. And so sometimes we really have to push.
Let me pause you there, Derek. Okay.
Yes.
Give us examples. We wanted this information. We requested for it. We got it. We wanted this information. We requested for it. We are still hearing crickets. Just 2 cases.
You're really putting me on the wall, eh?
Yeah,
But
I mean, because I just don't want us to have a conversation about, yes, we know there's been progress, there's been this and the other, and then we're talking about enhancing transparency through access to information. If it's working, so why are we talking about it?
Actually, what we're actually asking for is a little transparency on this matter.
Okay.
Yes.
There was a time we requested for information on COVID-19 budgetary and donations that the government had received in terms of, you remember when COVID was beginning?
Yes.
And we requested information and we were able to get that information. We've made so many access to information requests for information to county governments. We've been able to receive them. But a few examples on the information we've not been able to receive, the SGR contract. We did request so many times, but we have not been able to receive that information to date.
Why do you think that is? And maybe we can also hear from you, Jane. Why is it? Because oftentimes they say that if you can understand the intricacies of an issue, then it will allow you to be able to then get your solution. So now, if this problem keeps coming up, that the access to information is difficult, there is a reluctance to share this information, why? Why do you think that is?
I was actually reflecting on this just yesterday was the International Day on Access to Information, and basically for me, we have the relevant laws, we have the bodies, but I think the more difficult thing to change is the culture. The culture is really what we are struggling with, where people feel, and I was trying to correlate it with the context of even in our homes. We were not brought up to ask for information from our parents. If you go to school, you don't ask your teacher. Decisions are made for you, and then you're supposed to just accept them. Think about even seeing a doctor. We don't even ask about the diagnosis. They give you prescriptions, and you take them and you go to the pharmacy. Because when you ask, they hesitate, and you're like, oh, so I'm not supposed to ask for this information. So if you think about it that way, it reflects in how our public officials operate. So that they feel this information, it's from a very negative point of view. They feel that, why are you asking for that information?
Yeah.
Are you looking to expose me? And those are questions we have been confronted with when we ask. They say, uliza mkubwa. Have you been authorized to access this information by mkubwa? So it's just, I think that's the struggle. Because that you can't address by law. We have the constitution, we have broad frameworks. But then how do you change that perception that this information is private and confidential? Or it has to be authorized by so-and-so? I might just be asking because I want to know if you're carrying out a school project in my area. I just want to know. I'm a parent in that school.
Right.
So I just want to know what your priorities are, who's being given that contract. I might just want to know. And legally, I'm not even supposed to give you reasons why I want to know that information.
But does it not also point out to something fairly nefarious in our system, where someone who is in some quasi-authority has a connection with somebody who has real authority, and so everything that they do automatically relates in their minds. So it's like, I cannot give this information because it might place this person in a bad light. So the greater picture of public good, public servant, I'm your employer, when I ask you something, you should actually be telling me. It's like, no, we're not going to tell you. It's a quiet conspiracy. I don't think people don't sit down and plan and say, this is what we're going to do. But it is how public service works, so that somebody understands that in so doing, they've protected the mkubwa. Okay? And maybe the mkubwa doesn't need protection. But that's how they feel. And also, because of the deep-set corruption that we have in this country, everyone at their level has a deal going on. So when you ask that question, the deal that they're involved in comes to mind.
Of course.
So you pass the buck, another Kenyan trait, mkubwa. Okay? So this merry-go-round just continues. So it isn't that the information isn't there, but they know that perhaps with that information, a lot more than they would want to be in the public domain will become public. Yes. Because in all honesty, ask yourself a simple question. If there was absolutely nothing to hide, why do you want to keep it secret?
Sure.
All these civil servants we speak of, these people are well educated, they understand the law. And given where they work, they know exactly what is required of them and what they're supposed to do. They do know.
So could that be it then? If TI Kenya went in, or ICJ went in with the nose that perhaps we're not being given this information, perhaps this information is not being shared with us because there is something to hide. If you go in knowing that, wouldn't it then be easier to reveal some of these things then that are being looked for?
Yeah, and I think Kenya, since its inception, we have always had an information blackout. So whenever we try to shine the light on anything, it is perceived as if we are looking for trouble. So anytime we knock onto doors and try to seek information, even when there is nothing to hide, whoever is supposed to give that information perceives that we are certainly looking for something. But the cure for Dr. Chris's question is the regulations. Identify who is an information officer. Every department should have an information officer. Of course, procedurally and protocol. Even myself, there is some information I cannot reveal about my
Your
organization.
yeah.
But there is someone who is supposed to reveal that information. So even in government, you might seek information from someone who is not authorized to reveal it, but there are definitely someone who they should direct you and who should give you that information. It is just procedural, it is expected, but nowhere is it expected that there's information which should not be given. But of course, because corruption is always a web, there is someone eating at every level. So that is why there is sometimes some reluctance in that information getting out. The mkubwa might be involved in something else. The mdogo also has their own share in that whole web which the mkubwa does not know. But it is a web. And the only reason why you should not be given information is because of the likelihood that there's some danger lurking.
State security.
But again, if you look at the legislative journey we have traveled with the Access to Information Act, before no one was supposed to reveal any government information. And some of those who gave this information out, the Munyakeis, they were fired, and because just because of that.
Yeah.
So at least now we have some safety nets where anyone is at liberty to. You cannot be victimized for giving out information as long as it is a public information.
I just want you to pause there. You're talking about the law. Is that law really practiced? Because what you're saying is that whistleblowers will be protected. I'm contextualizing it. Are whistleblowers protected in this country? From what I've observed, they are victimized to their teeth, and their lives become a living hell.
And those victimizing them are still using the law as grounds.
Yes.
Well, as I said earlier, we are not there yet. But I can assure you that we are better, way better than what we had before. Today, whistleblowers have at least some safety net, some protection from both from government and even civil society. And it might not be out there, but it is way harder to victimize them now. And also in terms of seeking information, we have way more tools right now as compared to the former regimes. We have the Constitution. You can simply knock to any office with that specific article of the Constitution. We have institutions such as the Ombudsman, the Commission of Administrative Justice, who are supposed to ensure that any information that is sought should be given. We have the courts, which are more proactive and justice oriented today. So we have way more tools today than we had before. There is some progress.
Granted. So there are many tools to use. There's a lot of progress that has been made on this particular front. Now we want to highlight those gains that we've made and the gaps that are still missing. That's a conversation that we're having today on enhancing transparency and accountability in governance process through access to information. Our guests in the studio today, Derek Mahandia, he's a regional officer at Transparency International Kenya, and Jen Muhia, program officer for economic justice at ICJ Kenya. Your friend Sarah Nyakeo says, I love it when my friends win. Jen, I see you. Yeah, so shout out to you, and from Jen, from Sarah to Jen, Jen to Sarah. You can wave. You took us through, what we have currently, the legal regime, the process of accessing information, and request it from whichever office. You can even go to the ombudsman, and then you can escalate it as far as even going to court to ask the court to compel the certain office to give you that information. And then also, Derek, you told us You've actually been able to access information you requested for it from the national government, from the county government, but there's some information that is not easily forthcoming because obviously you have several strings. For example, SGR contract, there's a lot of political heavy hand on it, on the implications of just giving you that information. So obviously a junior officer will not just give you that information if the top has not said share information. Now, how do you make that junior officer tell you the truth of why they can't give you the information? Because you said, yeah, you can even have an information officer in every ministry, but you will still have an information officer, but they are answerable to senior people who have then political power. How do you make them tell you the truth?
Well, for the record, the top promised.
You want it, I'll give you.
Because procedurally it might be a bit difficult, but the most important thing and what these junior officers need to understand is as long as there is a likelihood of corruption or abuse of mismanagement of funds, they are under obligation to release that information under the whistleblower scheme. So they do not need any approvals at all. They can come out in the open and just reveal that information to whichever agency seeks it. So now, because of also the culture from the top that this information, they are not releasing it, so obviously junior officers will find it difficult because of repercussions or otherwise. It's just a question, it's a matter of culture that we do not have a legal solution for. Yeah.
Actually, have you found that at times when you seek information, the delay or what seems to be obstruction is actually a bargaining process? That somebody is hoping that you will talk to them.
And by talking,
talking, we're not. Yeah, we don't mean having a conversation. We mean having a conversation. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a contributing factor where you find even when you physically go to an office and you have an oral conversation with somebody, they might disclose more than you trying to use like the formal process of it. So it plays out, and I think the legal solution, I think we need to go back to sort of the legal solutions are not working anymore. There's definitely the issue of strengthening our whistleblower sort of regulation so that we have proper mechanisms, so that I know even as a junior most officer in a public office, I have protection and that system is actually working. But I think we also need to reevaluate. Like, let's look at public service as an organization and look at it from operate from a value system.
Right.
We have values within our constitution. To what extent do people recognize that within the system?
Even as you say that, it's interesting, Jane, as you talk about reevaluation. So then, maybe then it's important to shed light on what a situation then would assist or how it would help if we had transparency within the system, right? Because oftentimes we say, okay, well, things are not working. We don't really know what's going on, but then what? But if we look at the importance of having this transparency within the system, what then would it foster? Maybe we can look at some of those things and maybe you can help out with that. That if we have a system of doing things that is open, that is transparent, how then would it assist or how would it help?
The benefits of it.
What are the benefits?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is trust. Earlier in the conversation, I heard you say how the relationship between the government and the citizenry at the moment is suspicion. Every time we are looking at each other with suspicion, or I think information and just being open fosters that sort of trust between the people and the government. Then we have decision making. As a citizen, the very basics of democracy is a government by the people, for the people, and the people should be engaged. So the only way I can effectively engage with my government is if I have the necessary information. Then we also have the bigger issues of even fair business. Look at it from even a business perspective. People who want to get government business, if that process is not open, or you just know there are certain people who will get the tenders and you don't even have a fighting chance if you don't know people, then there's that also. Fair opportunity for everyone, and the bigger pictures also go into public service delivery, health, education. So if you look at corruption in the sense that we are wasting so much resource, so if we were a bit more open and transparent and tried to close those gaps, how much more can we do to enhance such essential services?
Yeah, especially on corruption. Corruption thrives in darkness. So the moment the fund holders and managers know that there will be no one asking them questions on how they've utilized the funds, then it's more easy for them to misappropriate those funds. So access to information is a very essential tool in fighting corruption and enhancing transparency in government.
I don't even think many of our people in authority are afraid of questions being asked, because those at the very top have got good PR. They will give you the impression that, in fact, that information is very easy to access.
What is that?
If you've had a problem, you just come and see me and we'll see. But that is not a problem. It's never a problem as they're talking to you. Then wait and see if you'll get that information. You'll be taken down in so many circles.
Yeah.
And every time you go back to them, the question is, you mean you haven't gotten information yet? Who have you been dealing with? And you give the name, says, no, leave it with me.
As Jen mentioned, I think in our field, it is easier to get information informally. So if you are talking to someone in an office, they will give you all that information more readily. But the moment you make a formal request, then that is where the trouble begins. I totally agree with you, City.
I'm sitting here and I'm asking myself, were we actually ready we passed a constitution, but were we ready to accept this constitution and to adopt the constitution as our constitution? All of us as citizens. I'm just going back from where Jane was coming from basic community level. Today, you are somebody, your father comes to you and is asking you information about your mother. You've got to think twice before you see what kind of information you're going to give your father about your mother. And why? It's just because, why does he want this information? Am I going to be, setting up my mom? It's always looking at what is the likely negative result of the information that I'm going to give. And like you said, Jane, from school, it's only very young children who are very readily will tell you, Daddy amesema yuko. But everybody else will bring it.
Daddy amesema
nikwambie hayuko. Yes. But beyond that, once they start getting a bit of knowledge, they play ball. They know, okay, so this information, I don't just readily share this information with everybody. So we have it ingrained in us. So as we come up with this constitution that says there shall be a lot of, transparency in public information, there will be public participation. There's no decision that will be made at any level of government without involving the citizens. And if you are the one who's a duty bearer, you've been given this responsibility to exercise authority. You're exercising it on behalf of the people. So you should, were we ready, really?
No,
if you put me in a position today and you came and asked me for that information, even after having sat on this chair for many years and, demanding access to information, I'll think twice.
I think, Eric, the very essence of our constitution is the fact that it is viewed as one of the most progressive. So there are many things in it that are aspirational. But that is it. That is the very important part. It is what that has allowed us to make certain progress. So if you look at culture and how culture is built, it's over many years. The constitution has only been here for 10 years. So I think it is to acknowledge that we are making progress, that we are doing. And it is by virtue of the aspirations in our constitution that we can make that progress. Sure. And then in due time, now we start seeing that culture change. Yeah.
And just to add on that, the constitution might have gone beyond the thinking of the ordinary Kenyan. And what we have seen, just as much as the idea that a government officer is required to reveal such amounts of information is so hard to comprehend. The common citizen might also find it difficult to comprehend why they need to understand how much was spent on the SGR. So we haven't had so many Kenyans, a massive number of Kenyans knocking on doors, asking for certain for information and being agitated or angry when that information is not given. So that is likely to take a lot of time in just changing the culture of Kenyans and making them understand the importance of access to information, appreciating why it was there in the constitution in the first place, and how they can make use of that information effectively.
I hear what you're saying, but I really do feel as though we approach this thing from a coddling perspective, and we say, oh, this is the way in which we are, and we've made progress over the years, and our constitution is only 10 years old, and it's been compounded traditional behavior, so we've improved. There are democracies on this globe today whereby it is not a suggestion that you will comport yourself in a particular way, that we are not asking you or begging you or understanding your traditions and cultures. We're saying that as an entity, nationally, government, state, country, this is the way in which we are going to behave. We will be transparent. We will be accountable. Nobody's, like we say in Nigeria, nobody's saying I beg. No. This is the way in which we are going to operate. So when we're now trying to coddle this behavior of saying, we have been this way for so long, and we're only trying now to get out of this shell, in my opinion, it is going to be that way for a very long time.
So it should be forced.
Forever.
So it's like you have gangrene in your leg. The doctor doesn't speak to the gangrene and say, okay, let's see if you're going to spread a little bit. But let's just wait and see. We know you've been there for some time. No, you cut it off. So when are we going to get to that point where you say we're angry enough and going to ask enough questions and demand that something ought to be done, or just kind of petting this thing along and hoping that one day some bite you?
That's what I was saying. It starts with us. Just like Derek is saying, are you comfortable when you're asking that information? Are you comfortable to seek information? How many people today would sit back and think, yeah, I think I need to know how much Nairobi City County is spending this year in terms of budget? How many? How many find that, it's important to find out how much is Nairobi collecting in revenue from just parking alone? How many? It's only a group of people who are in a certain space. And we call this space the active, the civil society, the all.
Active citizens.
Everybody else, yeah. So how do we change that culture of everybody? You're saying, let's push this. How do we push it?
I think that is something we confront every day working in this space, is that you understand, being in this space and interacting with the issue every day, you realize just how important that it is. But you also need the citizenry, because the government and what is happening is a reflection of who we are as a society. We are the ones enabling it. The reason why we cannot say, no, this is not going to go on, is that some of us are benefiting from that system and we are okay with it. So until we all acknowledge and are on one page that we have to play on a fair sort of playing ground, only then can things change. But for now, it's just that constant battle of...
people
Jane,
like it.
No, Jane, it won't happen. It actually won't happen. Even give it 1,000 years, give it a million, it won't happen. And the reason why it won't happen, leadership, by its very essence, is supposed to bring about a situation that ensures that these things happen. They don't happen on their own. They never do. If the leadership is not only comfortable with it, but they perpetuate it, then we are stuck. And the things we keep hearing is how, that's our coping mechanism, how we cope with all this. It may offend you at a personal level and you may want, but everyone around you seems comfortable. What you don't realize, they may be as uncomfortable as you, but everyone is trying to find a way of coping with this. So, well, it's culture. Coping.
Oh, it's been there for so long.
Coping.
We've made progress.
Coping. What progress?
But I think I agree with Daktari when you talk about, I think one of the other many elements is political will. So, for instance, take the example of Makueni County, and why it is being recognized for the willingness to disclose. It's because it's coming from the top. Actually, some of the conversation to hear is that, oh, what will happen if Kivuda leaves?
When
if all
Kivuda
these things,
leaves.
if all these things have not now been put in legislation. So I agree with you. Political will really says a lot, and it sets the pace for everyone else.
Now, unfortunately, political will is something that you hope
you
that
can only
one
hope.
individual will have it. So Kivuda Kibwana has demonstrated that he has, the willingness to share information and to involve the people of Makueni in governance. Have the people of Makueni internalized that? And is it what they'll be looking for in the next governor? Or will they be looking for something different? How long will it take before all of us, as the residents of Makueni, see these are the benefits, or everybody in the country can see these are the benefits of actually having a leader who sees the point of involving citizens in every step of decision making. Now we shall therefore be looking for, among other things, tick this box. Do you demonstrate political willingness? It's not coping, City. It's still, yes, we need a leader, but also we need leaders such as ICJ and Transparency International to then come down and focus on inculcating that culture in us.
What would form that symbiotic relationship? Because I see that's what needs to happen, that you have a leader clearly who knows where he or she is going, right? And now has these tenets of accountability and transparency lined up properly, but then also needs other people within the mix to make this thing work. So what are some of the things that obviously do you as a leader, do you say from the very beginning that I'm going to bring other people on board to check us, to make sure that we are going in the right direction? Do I say that as I'm starting to do these things, I will bring you in and walk with us along the way, not just overlooking in terms of oversight, but, I'm sharing information with you. So it becomes a natural way of doing things as opposed to be pushed and prodded in order to then share. How would it work? Because clearly it seems as though that's the way it must happen. That there must be a relationship, give and take, and that both sides benefit in these things of accountability and transparency. How do you start off if that's what we must do after we've cut off the leg, of course?
I think definitely leadership is usually the catalyst for revolution and change and ethos in every institution. The people of Makueni have benefited from that, and now even the next time they get a leader, there will be the next leader they get, they will demand more. Or
the bar is high.
The bar is high, so they will not demand, they will not accept anything less. How to resolve that is, of course, Kivuta was elected among many contestants, but he was chosen, and the people of Makueni are able to see the benefits of electing the right leaders. The only thing that needs to be done is other voters in other counties and other constituencies, and of course nationally, just need to replicate that. It's not rocket science. We just need to vote for people who espouse the values that we seek.
It's rocket science, but
Rocket science.
Well,
is
it's
rocket
another
science.
kind of science.
The people of this country keep talking about, we had Mwai Kibaki, we had Mwai Kibaki. There's the same people who have voted 2 elections after Mwai Kibaki, and they're going to a third. Rocket science, my friend. Are you hearing people talking about, so these are the qualities that we saw in Mwai Kibaki, and this is what we'll be looking for in the next leader. Have you had any conversation like that? And yet, we are constantly talking about, the glory years of Kibaki. Rocket city.
One of the things that perhaps is difficult to grasp is this question of what do you do? Because consensus as to the need for change, that one there is no debate. Consensus as to the fact that certain changes need to take place. People agree, but then what to do beyond the Kenyan game? This one should actually be a game on TV. Who do we blame next? Okay, because it's what we do. So and so ought to do this. Suggestions, perhaps, but the I and what I ought to do. In that space that you have, which is you, how do you actually stand for what is actually right and say, no, that I'm not going to do. It doesn't really matter what everybody else is doing. That I am not going to do. Simple case. How many times have you been to a public gathering and people wear their masks on their chin and tell someone, Chief or Madam, please, you're not protecting your chin. You're supposed to protect your nose. How often have you even pointed that out and said, this is what you ought to do? This, I'm calling it a coping mechanism, Eric. Yeah? You don't want to stand out as being the odd person. And since you don't see any direct harm in it, you figure, let me just comply. Now, unfortunately, it's the same attitude that you'll carry with throughout everything else that you do. So even when something which is patently wrong is taking place, you still find ways and means of trying to reason with it and explain it. Now, the moment you're explaining wrong, something has really gone off. Because wrong is just wrong. There's no if and but. It's wrong.
Yes, I think we spend so much time diagonizing and not issuing prescriptions and treating the problem.
A coping mechanism. Yes.
But we have to be to call out the citizen. There's no way we can fix this without a critical mass of citizens.
We've had members of parliament in this studio. If you didn't know the person was a member of parliament, you'd think this is a very concerned citizen. Okay?
And they understand the pain.
These people, the decisions they make, you actually pause and say, but this guy's a member of parliament. Which people is he talking about? It's them who make these decisions. The things they do. And I'm wondering, what's this person talking about? Why is he talking like us?
In fact, the president should dissolve this parliament.
Yes.
Where I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Should he also dissolve himself?
Yeah, all of us to go home.
the things these parliamentarians do, and you're thinking, what's this person talking about? So, yes, that culture explains where we are even now with understanding of leadership. You want a leadership that doesn't shed too much light on what you particularly do not want to see. That's why we like these opaque leaders. You know very well this guy is opaque. The guy has a background that a thug would envy, okay? But you still vote that person in.
We don't want to confront our issues. Our
No,
truths.
we don't. We don't want to confront our issues. So we choose people whom we know or we think
can
are
blame
or
easily.
slightly worse than us. So that's why I called it a coping mechanism. We choose these leaders deliberately so that we don't know what we're doing. We do know. At the back of our minds, there's a guilt factor that Kenyans carry with them because they know they do wrong. It's not that they don't know. Why do you think the attendance in our churches is so high? People need absolution.
Sanitize after 6 days of rubbish.
They know that they're doing wrong. They are clearly aware.
Interesting conversations. They continue. This is what we have every weekday morning, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. in the Situation Room. Interesting conversations we've had with Jane Mohia, Program Officer, Economic Justice at ICJ Kenya, and Derek Mahandia, Regional Officer, Transparency International Kenya. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Come back
very
again
much.
soon.
Thank you.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.